So it's finally happened. Vladimir Putin has done his big end of year speech for 2024. For those of you who don't know what this is, every year Vladimir Putin does like a carefully choreographed speech that will last for like hours at a time, like an hour, 2 hours, sometimes even three, if he's feeling up to it. Um, and he will just go on for a ramble, basically saying how everything's perfect, everything's fine. You know, if you've seen Avatar, there is no war in Ba Sing Se. However, at the end of this, it is the opportunity for people in the press to ask questions. And of course, these questions are, of course, carefully curated so that Putin knows, of course, what question is coming, so that nothing looks like he's been surprised or ambushed. He knows what question is being asked. The question is, or his answer is already sort of pre-prepared. You know, it's a perfectly choreographed event. And quite frankly, this time, nothing shocking, except apparently Russia is prepared for a long range missile duel with America, and apparently he wants to like put this quote new missile, this hypersonic missile, which everyone has had for decades, to the test against a US defense system. America's not going to do that. No one's going to do that, because that would involve sharing, military US defense secrets with Russia. Don't think they're going to say yes to that. But again, makes Vladimir look sort of good to, idiots. There was, of course, the question about what was happening in Kursk, and apparently, well, I don't know when we'll push these terrorists out of Kursk, because again, remember, as far as Vladimir Putin and the Russian public are concerned, or at least the profile of what they want to push to, again, the rest of the Russian public, is that this is not a war. This is just a special military operation. That these people, even though Ukraine invaded the Kursk region and has taken their territory, this isn't a war or anything like that. No, these people are just terrorists, which again contravenes, treatment of soldiers captured during, wartime, etc. And we've seen these people being treated under terrorist charges rather than as prisoner of war, which again goes against Geneva Conventions, etc., etc. Again, shock horror, Russia breaking standards of contract, etc., etc. But other than that, there was really nothing new, really, in this. It's not worth it going over other than what I've just said there. However, Dmitry Medvedev, out of nowhere, comes out and makes a statement following on from the Times publishing the story about the recent assassination against one of their top military brass. To which Dmitry Medvedev has now turned around and said, "Oh, yeah, editor of the Times, they're now legitimate military targets." So Russia pretty much openly now saying, yeah, journalists are now legitimate military targets, which again should not surprise us, because in their retreat from Syria, they shot someone for getting too close to their military base. While they're doing their little skedaddle to get out of Syria as fast as possible. Again, that future of that base is still very, very much in doubt, but we'll see what happens in the future, and we'll bring you any news or updates when anything happens there. But I do want to go into more of this, because this, to me, if you are the editors or an editor at the Times, should you probably be very worried. I would say if you are an editor of any newspaper across, not only in the UK but across Europe, you should probably be very worried indeed. Remember, Russia has been escalating its sabotage campaign. We saw the attempted assassination of the CEO of Rheinmetall this year as well. What's to say, maybe they don't have a go at a journalist. Now, of course, again, it would be very worrying. It would be an act of war. It would be an act of aggression. But bear in mind, we also had the conference between the head of MI6 and the CIA this year that happened as well, where the head of MI6 said himself that their intelligence service has gone a bit feral. So if I was a newspaper editor, I'd be very worried. I would be very worried. I think there's, should we take this as a threat? I think we should absolutely be treating it as such. And I think we need to be careful in this because it shows how desperate Russia is getting. So we're just going to quickly cover this because I think it does need to be covered in this. But, remember, Russia said it can only fight up until 2025. And I think next year, the clock is going to start ticking for them about how long they can fight. I think you're going to start seeing that. I think you're seeing that now with the fact that, during the speech, Vladimir Putin celebrated, "Oh, we've captured 2 villages." Well, okay, how many casualties did your side take trying to capture those 2 villages? From what we know, Russia is bleeding itself white trying to take this, and it is because of Western weaponry and weapons that we are sending them. Hence why we should absolutely be at this point just going, you know what, Ukraine, here's everything you could possibly ever want. Happy Christmas, Ukraine. I think we should be doing that. But again, there's still that hesitation to sort of really, should we say, properly equip and tool up Ukraine. But again, I've spoken that frustration before. But anyway, I do want to go into this. So over we go onto here. So this comes from The Guardian talking about this. Dmitry Medvedev says the editors of the Times are legitimate military targets. The Russian Security Council and deputy head Dmitry Medvedev has described the editors of the Times newspaper in Britain as a legitimate military target in response to the newspaper's coverage of the assassination of a Russian general. Medvedev vitriolic comments came out on Wednesday following a Times editorial in which the newspaper described the assassination of Lieutenant General Igor Kirov as a legitimate act of defense by Ukraine, which has now claimed responsibility for the killing. Again, if you're at war, assassination of generals, etc., goes back historically. There were many assassination attempts on generals throughout history. This is nothing new. And they are right by that. That is a legitimate act of defense. If you're going to kill a general, that is Ukraine defending itself. These 2 countries are at war at this point. Kirov has also said the head of the military's chemical and biological and radio weapons unit was also killed along with assistant when this device attached to an e-scooter exploded as 2 men left the building in a residential area in southeast Moscow on Tuesday. Kirov is, of course, one of the most senior Russian military officials killed in assassination away from the front lines since the start of the Kremlin offensive in Ukraine nearly 3 years ago, to which Dmitry said, "Those who carry out crimes against Russia always have accomplices. They too are now legitimate military targets. This categorically could also include these miserable jackals from the Times who have now cowardly hid behind their editorial. They are journalists doing their job. That is what they do. Again, of course, this is Russia. They don't like, newspapers acting in this way, even though, again, it is the Times. I have my problems with the Times, but them doing their job as journalists is perfectly fine. If Dmitry Medvedev doesn't like it, well, tough. That is what we in the West expect from our journalists when we want them to do. So this means, of course, the entire leadership of the publication, and of course, Medvedev, who served as Russia's president between 2008 and 2012, wrote on his Telegram channel. So he has said that the entire leadership of the publication, maybe even the owners of the Times, oh, you're now under threat. And I think this is a legitimate threat for them to say, you need to stop publishing articles, stories about how bad it's going for us, about the embarrassment of our, disastrous military sort of campaign on this. Because Russia here is whatever happens in the future, like Russia is done. It is spent for this, because it isn't going to rebuild these areas of Ukraine that it will take. We've seen this already in the Donetsk region. How many of those people in those next region are suddenly going to go, actually, being part of Russia has not paid dividends for us. It has not worked out well for us. How much control that area are they really going to have? How long before we start seeing guerrilla attacks, rebels? We're already seeing that, bear in mind, in those occupied areas already. What's to say afterwards those are not going to increase, they're going to continue. This, of course, creates a problem of Russia holding that area. Like I said, I've said many times before, Russia can take territory, but holding it is a vastly different problem. You want to look at something like that? Look at Iraq. The American military basically took Iraq in 5 days. Holding it was a vastly different story. Vastly different story. But, and we will probably see that after, depending on what happens. So, in, of course, this very thinly veiled tweet, the very hawkish former president added that the journalist at the Times of London should be, quote, careful as anything goes in London. So, basically, at that point, Dmitry Medvedev threatening journalists, saying, you should be careful as anything goes. What are we meant to be sort of take away from that statement? That is a very dangerous statement. And now, if they follow through on this threat? Remember, head of MI6 has said, Russian their intelligence agencies have gone a bit feral. If they assassinate someone on UK soil and a citizen of this country, that's an act of war. That's Article 5 territory. But this is really going to show you how desperate they are getting. If 2025 has been said before, when this sort of looked like it was going to go long for a couple of years, the Russian sources, people like Dmitry Medvedev and other people in the Russia, and we've heard this sort of repeated by other like Western intelligence and other things as well, that Russia can only fight up until 2025. They are getting more and more desperate. And I think this just goes to show you how desperate they are. If they are saying to journalists that, be careful, anything goes in London, then I think this just goes to show you how desperate they are on this. So, obviously, the Prime Minister and Lammy did respond. So Lammy said that this is a complete gangster threat against Times journalists, and it smacks of desperation. Newspapers do represent the best of British values, freedom, democracy, and independent thinking. Also, the Prime Minister's official spokesperson responded as well, saying these are just simply the latest threats now of a desperate rhetoric coming from Putin's government. Unlike in Russia, the press freedom is now a cornerstone of our democracy, and we take any threats made by Russia incredibly seriously. So we will now have to see, of course, what happens here. But that is worrying. That is worrying. That is more worrying than Putin's rhetoric saying, "Oh yes, we're prepared for a missile duel with America." Meanwhile, you've got Dmitry Medvedev saying that, which comes across as very desperate. And I think the Times even more should be turning around and going, "No, screw you. We're going to dedicate even more resources to commenting on stuff going on in Russia, how bad it's going in Russia. I would love to see the Times reaction on that. I don't think they've made any response to that on that, but I would love to see them come out publicly and say that. But of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.